Now, um, Brendan, you can't retire in 2 years, I'm telling you.
I've already planned.
Good afternoon, councillors, members of the public, officers, welcome along. I declare this meeting open. Under announcements, last Friday I signed the document to purchase the South building, and yesterday the CEO has also signed it, so that is now signed. An agreement is in place, and I can advise for public information the purchase price for that building was $2.4 million. Settlement will occur on the 5th of July 2018. I also want to add our congratulations to David Smith for his recently awarded Honour Order of Australia medal, so please pass it on to David Tresnan or Councillor Smith. Great honour indeed. And my fuel costs for the period were $74.96. Councillor Hayward is an apology for tonight. Declarations of interest, we have those declarations recorded, and Councillor Cook also declares impartiality interest with respect to item 12.1. Are there any further declarations, councillors? Thank you. We have no public questions. Confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting, so I'm prepared to move. Thank you, Councillor McGuell. Seconder. Councillor Brown, all in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. Do we have any petitions? Councillor McGuell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll read it out. I, Isabel Hislop of 9 Roscommon Place, Withers, in the state of West Australia, am the promoter of the petition which contains 262 signatures. The petition is in relation to banning of plastic straws and single-use plastics from events organised or sponsored by the City of Bunbury. We, the undersigned, being electors of the City of Bunbury, oppose the use of single-use plastics and plastic straws. And I'll move that we receive that petition. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kelly. All in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thanks, Councillor McGuell.
Excuse me, sir. Is that a valid petition?
Yeah, it appears to me to be a valid petition. Councillor Steck and Councillor McGuell has made that statement to that effect. Thank you. Deputations, we have a request from Mr Slavin, the club president of the Bunbury Bowling and Social Club, to speak to item 10.25. Those who agree, please indicate. That's approved. And we also have a request from Mr Stan Clifton to speak to item 10.42. Those who agree, please indicate. That's approved. So, gents, when I get to those items, I'll invite you to come forward and you have a 5-minute period to speak. Thank you. Councillors, dealing with tonight's agenda, there are only 2 items that haven't been highlighted for further discussion or consideration. They are items 10.31, which is the 5-year management agreement with BREC, and item 10.41. Are there any further? They're the 2 items that I don't have for discussion. Does anybody want to raise either of those? Can I have someone move those then? Councillor Cook, seconder. Councillor McGuell, all in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. We go to item 10.21. Councillor McCleary.
Attended all the integrated financial plan and budget.
Sorry, Councillor McCleary, are you
No.
are you moving?
No, I'm moving. Sorry.
Yes.
Property rates, yes, sir. Proposed increase of property rates
Yes.
for 2018.
What are you moving? Which one?
I'm moving. Sorry, yes, you're quite right, and I'll just come down. I'm here with the 3.5% requested Chief Executive Officer to 2A, sir.
So you're moving
Request-
1 and 2A.
Yes, please.
Is there a second? Is there a seconder? Councillor
Yes.
Kelly.
Raring to go, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, well, off you go then, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having attended all the integrated financial plan and budgetary workshops with the executive and councillors, and after serious consideration of all the implications facing raising the rates to 3.5% for 2018-19, that includes the 1% to be set aside for the renewal and upgrade of existing infrastructure assets, I fully support this recommendation. The ratepayer on average will be charged an extra $1 a week, and if anyone has difficulty with payments, they will be made most welcome to discuss this with staff, and a payment solution that fits with their income will be found. If we want to attract visitor, new residents and new industries to Bunbury, we have to spend money to ensure we have the infrastructure to cater for the increase in population and have services in place. The city have to rely on a healthy revenue base to achieve this. 3.5% rise will ensure the city can continue improving the assets, services and promotion of our city. Take a minute and look back over the last 5 years and remember what we have achieved. We have almost stopped hearing about other shires having more than us, or the other complaint, never anything to do in Bunbury. You'll remember what I'm talking about. Please do not send us back to those good old days by taking the soft approach to this important decision. Bunbury is in good shape because we dared to make brave, responsible decisions, stayed informed, motivated and focused regarding budget rate rises. Last year's increase was 4.5%, and to date, 99.07% have been collected, a wonderful achievement from our supporting residents. This year, we are recommending only 3.5% a rise, a drop of 1%. We are considering our lower income residents and property owners who are finding it financially difficult in this economy. I know because I'm in that basket also. We have reduced our leases and licences for community organisations. We have free parking in the CBD, all cost reductions that can be recovered in the 3.5% rise. But to go any lower so early into our IFP will erode all the good work Council has achieved to date and push the aim and success of that future plan further and further away. Sure, in the short term, a reduction in rates may hardly make a dent. Projects are not affected because finance is already in place from previous years. But what of the years ahead? Where will the money come from for BREC, BRAG, community organisations when they need assistance, roads, assets, loans? Do we just shrug and say, she'll be right, mate, and leave the struggle and pain to our ratepayers and our future councillors-elect when they have to do the correction in rates and find a huge increase required? No, I do not think so. We are not cut from that cloth. Lowering our revenue, especially with state and federal government putting the squeeze on grants and with the loyalty for regions, almost a myth, local government and the community need to work together. May I remind councillors that rates are local government main income stream, now well over 52%. Regular rate increases are a must to keep ahead of service charges such as electricity for our streets, parks, buildings and much more. To allow for low rates over a long period of time will cause extreme hardship for residents when catch-up is required. Capel is a good example. They are crying in pain right now. Same happened to Bunbury in 2014 when we made the corrections. Councillors, if you are keen to reduce the rate base, consider next year. It might be timely then to consider another reduction in rates as GRV will be back on the radar and interest rates will be set to take a hike. We can workshop this thoroughly in preparation. But for now, for the future, I ask you, do you think an extra $1 a week to provide safe and well-constructed bicycle footpaths, longer library hours at the museum, increase in free events, better promotion of our city to encourage visitors, green lawns instead of the scorched earth policy we seem to have in place over summer when all the other surrounding shires have lush green areas? Do you think an extra $1 per week to continue to improve the Kambana Bay facilities for our residents and our sporting buildings and ovals excessive? I think my $1 per week increase this year will be spent wisely. I can't wait to see the results. Bunbury has become a most desirable city to live, work and visit. Investors are at the door now. Don't stop progress, councillors. It has only just begun. Vote for the 3.5% rate rise tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor McCleary. Stole a few of those points. Firstly, councillors, I've got two headings here. One is the process by which we arrived at 3.5%, and the second is to whether or not the 3.5% is reasonable in the circumstances that we have. Firstly, the process. As everybody knows, we were involved in a number of budget workshops over quite some time. It was very diligent work. I attended them all, as I think most councillors did. And we worked our way through it with Mr Ransom and his team to ensure that we had something that we could put our hand on and our hand on our heart and say, look, we've worked through this diligently. I'm a great believer in process, and that process went through, and this seems to have been lobbed on us, the alternative at the last moment. So I want to stick with the process. I think it's a sound process. It's been something that we've had here for quite some years, or the time I've been here. And I like that process where we all work through it bit by bit and come to a conclusion, which we did, which is 1 and 2A. The second part of it is the reasonableness of this proposal at 3.5. It's not as if we're spending money willy-nilly and throwing it around, taking trips to places far off or otherwise being less than frugal. We have an $11 million asset gap. We need to pay off debt, and more importantly, as Councillor McCleary's pointed out, we need to improve the infrastructure around Bunbury. It's an investment in Bunbury. This is not something that's just being frittered away. Infrastructure, shade, playgrounds, pathways, etc., all of those things that people in the community chest contribute to ensure that they've got the lifestyle that they wish to have. And I think it's very important, and I also think it's quite reasonable. Drawing attention to an article that just appeared in today's paper, and it was a Walger article, listed a dozen local governments in the metropolitan area, and they said of which the average rate rise was 2.5%. Ours is 3.5, but as we know, that 1% that we've tacked on is for infrastructure, and a very wise investment it is. So if we take that 1%, which we've agreed to over 3 years, off there, we're on average with what's happening in the metro area with those 12 major metropolitan local governments. I might add, if the 2.5% of the rates and then add that 1% was set up against what the state government has done with the 7% increase in electricity, 5.5% for water, 5.8% for car rego, 3.7% for motor licences, our rise of 2.5% in the base rates is a very modest one. So it's hoped that ratepayers will recognise that that rate rise is not something that we've taken lightly. We've worked through it over a great period of time. It is not something that's going to be thrown around willy-nilly. It is an investment in their city, a city that they're proud of and we are proud of, and to be able to invest that money into the city is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a modest rise. Also, I'd like to say what Councillor McCleary made about point about the GRV next year is another opportunity for us to workshop our way through what we're going to do with the long-term financial plan. I say stick to the 3.5 as we've workshopped so diligently. Next year it may well be a lot less. So I'll be supporting the recommendation as it's been proposed, as it's been moved and seconded. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Speaker against? Councillor McGrail.
I'll be speaking against, thanks Mr Mayor, and proposing that we recommend 2B, which is the 2.9%. And just before I get started, I would like to thank Mr Ranson and his team for the work that's been done over the last 3 or 4 months. Obviously a massive part of their job and a massive project overdone, so to be able to get to this point is very good. So thank you for your work and for the councillors who have been along that process. Councillors, what Councillor McCleary was talking about in terms of parks and roadworks and all that kind of stuff is all great stuff. It really is. By reducing this from 3.5% to 2.9% does not mean we are removing any of those stuff. We're not removing any projects. We're not dropping any services. Basically, what has happened with this is we did work on 3.5%. I was against that a few times. I did send a couple of notices saying that I would like to see it lower, and thankfully we got to that situation. What we have effectively got is us, the staff, directed by the CEO, as I believe, has gone away and said, can we find some more savings? That's not get rid of this project or remove this project. It's savings where they have continually been overbudgeted. Well, we've continually overbudgeted year after year. So they've gone back and said, well, why do you need this money? And alternatively, we come back with an amount to say, well, we can find this savings. So all we are deciding is whether or not we're going to, with the 3.5% increase, we're going to sit with $260,000 reserve at the end of the year, or we go with option 2 and have a $40,000 reserve. Now, I think I speak for most of us when we're budgeting. If you sit there with a reserve, some money in the back pocket, you think, oh, well, we can dip into that and not worry about it. With this, with having a bit of a responsibility with our staff's team, saying, well, this is what you have to work with and this is what you have to do, and not letting them overdo that, because we all do know that we can obviously dip into when we don't need to. So we do review this every 3 months. I'm more than confident that we will find savings, as we have done this year. So I see there's no need to. We need to look at the affordability of our community. Councillor Kelly did discuss the other raises coming this year, and 7.5%, 5.5%, 3.7%, they're all huge amounts when you consider inflation is 1%. Wages seems to be the only thing that isn't going up in the moment, especially in the private sector. So we need to be mindful of what our community can actually afford. I take on board that Councillor Mulcahy's point of saying it's $1 a week, it's no big deal. She may be right in some way. However, that happened last year and the year before that. It's only an extra $50. It's only extra $50. That continued compounding is having a massive effect on our community. We need to be mindful of what they can afford. And by doing this, we're basically saying, by accepting 2.9%, I'll be more than comfortable. We'll go back to our ratepayers and say, look, it was going to be 3.5%. Our staff have done a fantastic job to find some savings, and we're passing those savings back on to you. That may mean there might be extra $200,000 to be spent in the city and revitalising things, which would be great. So I urge you to vote against this one and support the 2.9% increase. 2.9% increase.
Speaker 4, Councillor Steele.
It's not very often I actually do vote for the higher one. I think it's probably the first time I will actually do this. The reason being, I know that Councillor McGuire just said about having a buffer of 260,000 compared to 41,000. I know I would rather have a bigger buffer to be able to play with things throughout the year. We are forever being asked throughout the year for more money for different events or something might go wrong. So I know, to me, having more of a buffer is actually more financially stable than having less of a buffer. Thank you.
Speaker against, Councillor Stick.
Thank you, sir. What's intriguing me at this point in time is that there's not one mention of the word business. We're talking about householders copping $1 a week, but business is going to cop a lot more than that. And they are one of our biggest employers in this city. And given the fact that, some of them have had hikes up to 30% in the last few years, seems really crazy to put the impost back on business who is employing people who are keeping families above the poverty line. So my intent is to ask councillors to seriously consider what they are looking at with this rate rise of 3.5%, because bearing in mind all the costs of rubbish collections, electricity, all of those things will be an indicative hike in costs for business, and that happens every year, and as it will to every other household. There is a slump. Unbeknown to councillors, I did write to our executives today on last note, so thank you, David. I was going to try and freeze it at 1% on inflation, but that would have cost us $700,000, and looking at the budget, it just wouldn't be substantially right for us to even consider that. I do also have a problem with trying to say and suggest that it's only, like as the Deputy Mayor alluded to, it's only a matter of this or it's only a matter of that. And every cost does have a measure of performance and a measure of whether or not a business can open their doors. And especially on a Saturday and a Sunday, and you're saying, what can you do in the city? well, I would suggest that keeping families employed through small business is paramount to the success of the city and the well-being and the vibrancy. So I'm asking councillors to not consider the 3.5% and go with the Deputy Mayor's version of the 2.9%.
Further speaker 4. Councillor McCreary to close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With Councillor McGuill, I understand also where you're coming from, but with the savings, they say the savings will be found, it's almost as if something's been lost. Nothing's been lost, okay? You're not going to be able to find things if they're not lost. With not removing the projects have not been removed this year. I get that, because all the money's been put in. The state government have given us the grants, etc., from this coming year. It's all been set in place. Where the problem is going to evolve is the following years, the 2019-20 budget. That's when we're going to fall into a deep hole. Not now. Everything is fine. And yes, we can tighten our belts. Mainly it's going to be in operational where they'll be tightening their belts, where there was that little bit extra perhaps made, iffy, in somewhere in maybe on roads, etc. But this is not good business to do it this way. You need to have it down pat where the money's actually coming from. You can't actually say, oh, yep, okay, well, we do need an extra 20 grand, but you never know, if we pull in our belts, we might be able to get it from over here. This is not very professional. We can't be going on like that, because just at the same time we could have a bushfire or something emergency could happen, and we need to be out there giving reserves to something, and we've got nothing to give. So I don't believe that there's not a long-term problem coming up with a lower rate base going on.
Point of order, Councillor Cook. What is it?
The councillors are addressing the audience and not the mayor.
Thank you.
I will.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Thank you, Councillor McCreary.
Thank you. I was actually looking at the camera up in the corner. However, it didn't wink at me, so I now look at you. The $200,000 collectively that we would save, if you like, if we went for a lower rate increase, you can do more with $200,000 than you can with giving property owners and household owners back $13 a year. Okay, they can go to Big Macca's with that, but if we have $200,000 there, we can actually do something that for the community. So that's the big difference. $13 a year savings between 2.9% and 3.5% is not going to be able to do a fantastic thing for that particular family, any particular family or business. Now, coming to business, and Councillor Steck rightly saying businesses are suffering. Absolutely, I'm a property owner. I get it. I've got one in light industrial area, one in town. And I also need leasing. We have tax relief. We have such a thing called tax relief. That does help. That gives you, it's not a lot, but it's 30%. Okay, that is more than what residents get. We need to be looking at the residents. So that is what I have to say. I really encourage you, once again, progress costs money. This is progress. We need to have a professional budget going. We don't need to have guesswork. We can do without that. So please vote for 3.5%.
I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's lost. Councillor McGuell, you foreshadowed 2B, which would also include 1, 2B and 3.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Smith. Councillor McGuell.
I think I've said all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Smith, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am torn on this issue, but I've been listening very carefully to the debate, and I believe Councillor McCreary and Councillor Kelly have put some pretty good views forward. However, I think the community is hurting at the moment, and I would like to add to their problems, and that's why I'm supporting a 2.9 increase in the rates. Sure, as you're probably all aware, I'd like to keep the museum open 7 days a week. I'd like to keep the library open extra as well. That I know that all takes money. But then you've also got to consider the impost on families and businesses. I understand inflation is not as high as what we think at the moment, and I think that maybe the economy is going to turn the corner in the next year, and maybe next year we can consider putting the rates up a little more so that we do have a bigger buffer. But for this particular time, I think 2.9 is probably fair raising the rates. But I do congratulate all the councillors on their debate. Thank you.
Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour. Those against? 2 against. Councillor McCleary and Councillor Kelly voted against, the rest voted for, and that's carried. Thank you. 10.2.2 requires an absolute majority. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Councillor Cook, thank you. Second to Councillor McGuell. Likely to be any debate? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.2.3 also requires an absolute majority. Can someone move that, please? Councillor Cook. Second up. Councillor McGuell. Any debate on this one? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.2.4 requires nominations, and I have received nominations from new councillors Brown and Smith, and according to our policy we do prefer that new councillors go along to the Wellga conference, but I'm happy to entertain any further nominations for those two. We all happy with that? Can someone move that councillors Brown and Smith be appointed? Councillor Steck, second up. Councillor Cook, all in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.2.5. Mr. Greg Slavin. Welcome to you, Greg. Come up to the lectern there. Greg is the President of the Bunbury Bowling and Social Club and is speaking for the recommendation. Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak to council about our loan request. The club seeks support of council to proceed with the application of a self-supported loan of $90,000 as set out in our application lodged on the 15th of May. The club also seeks support of council to allow the loan to proceed without the need for guarantor support, as has been the case with previous loans. In general, previous loans were supported by individual guarantors to the club of club members to individual amounts of between $2,000 and $10,000 per member. Thankfully, we've never had to call on them to provide that money to us. Membership of the club mainly consists of men and women in their retirement years. The average age of our membership is over 70 years. We are hoping, by the way, that that's going to come down over the years, but at the moment it's 70 years. Current membership is 275, with ladies at 65 and men at 165. The total membership, including of social members, is 45 members. Guarantees are generally aged between 60 and 70 at the start of the loan, and if the loan is going over 10 years, you see one of the issues we have with the present supply of guarantors is that we frequently lose them before our loans actually are completed. All loans approved since 1993 have been well serviced from our operating profit of the club. Over the last 10 years or so, the average operating profit of the club has been $85,000. All loans have been special income streams from bingo, which occurs every week at around $25,000 per year. An annual loan, and I'm sorry, I'm struggling a little bit because this afternoon I broke my glasses. So
you're doing very well.
The annual loan repayment over the same period has been an average of around about $34,000. And this year we are paying at the moment $8,500 per half year. Other funds from community bowls averages $10,000 per annum,
catering and hire of our facilities. Our wonderful bowling club is $17,000 per year, and membership averages around about $28 per annum. So funds are used for repayment of our loans and general operating expenses. The club is well managed by ex-professional men and women. It enjoys the advantages of being centrally located and is the hub of the South West Bowling League. The club rooms are well kept and provision has been made for the inclusion of all ages, from very young people to obviously the more elderly. The recent additions to the club, which has been very important as part of the reason why we're seeking this loan, have been to put in a bowling green and facilities that have access for disabled people. That was supported by a significant loan from the government earlier in the year. Those facilities have been just about completed. Considering the serviceability of past loans and the excellent state of financial standing of the club and our excellent potential for future development, the club administrators and members consider it opportunistic for the City of Bunbury to grant the club its request to proceed with borrowings without the need for guarantor assistance. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillors, I'll bring to your attention that number 3 of the executive recommendation does require that the land guarantors actually be included. Can I have someone move the executive recommendation? Councillor McCleary, is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just say it's a very worthy sports centre. They have been doing well for so many years. They've got a good track record. I see no reason why we shouldn't.
Councillor Stick?
I just reiterate those comments, sir.
Is there any speakers against? I'll put it all in favour. Those against? 1 against. That's carried. So that's the decision of council that 1, 2 and 3, which does require the guarantor. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Councillor.
(10.42), Mr Clifton. Welcome to you, Stan. There's same rules apply, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to make a presentation regarding this matter. Firstly, I'd like to raise a small matter which I feel may demonstrate to you some background as to where I personally stand on heritage issues. I own and live in a state heritage listed home, and it's on record that I made the initial application to have it included on the register. Having said that, I consider the situation here is very different. The owner of this property purchased it after the chimneys had been removed. The original north and south external walls had been removed and bricked up. The north and south windows had been removed and replaced with aluminium windows, and the roof was poorly repaired. Those poor quality works removed much of the heritage character of this building. The owner commenced a internal renovation by removing the kitchen and bathroom, but came to the conclusion that the fabric of the building did not justify renovation. The house has now been empty for the past 12 years and recently was subjected to some vandalism when the owner and his family were overseas. The owner works full-time, a permanent night shift, 7 days a week, and is recently married. He wants to live in this property with his wife. You have before you a report of Graham Teed, who is a chartered and registered builder. Mr Teed is well known in the construction industry. He has travelled worldwide, furthering his interest and knowledge of heritage buildings. He supervised the conversion of the Bunbury Silos from an industrial site to what is now the premier apartment and hotel complex in this city. He was recently awarded an Order of Australia for his services to the building industry. Mr Teed recommends the demolition of 5 Charles Street with the proviso that some internal fittings be retained and incorporated in the replacement home. You have before you the heritage impact statement of Mr Kent Lyon, architect. Mr Lyon notes that the building is not included in the city's municipal inventory or the heritage list as an individual place. He assesses the contribution of the building to the heritage of the Stirling Street area as moderate rather than high. Mr Lyon notes that the community needs to recognise the buildings of this nature, nearing or exceeding 100 years, have a limited life. Mr Lyon lists aspects of the owner's proposal to demolish and build a new residence which would enhance the heritage significance of the Stirling Street precinct. Mr Lyon considers that retention of design elements of the existing streetscape in the new building will contribute to the heritage value of the precinct. One of the main submissions I now make to you is the intention here is to replace the building with a building of similar facade which will retain the street amenity, enable the owner to maximise the use of the land area to enjoy a modern internal design with off-street parking and reusing some of the internal fittings. The new building would be moved to the south a touch on the lot, but still retaining the sawtooth setback pattern which are characteristics of the street front, which in turn would create access to the rear of the lot. This will take parked vehicles off the virgin front yard, create a safe and secure entry for occupants of the home who will be able to drive directly into a garage at the rear, close the door and enter the house directly. In this instance, I remind you that that person would be a young woman whose husband is away every night working. I respectfully submit that comment by council staff in their submission to you that the demolition of this home will place adjoining homes under the threat of demolition is unrealistic. This area contains some beautifully presented old homes. This one has never been in that category, even before the current owner purchased it. In fact, recent development in the precinct shows a difference in scale from original dwellings to new and renovated buildings. The owner can peek around the corner up to 50 Stirling Street and view a new, modern, shiny two-storey mansion worth upwards of $2 million with little heritage value. Other homes in the area have limestone and brick walls which restrict views of the facade of the home, solar panels on front verandas and roofs, and new coloured roofing material. Council staff have recommended that the demolition request should not be granted. However, Council would not allow the proposed plans for the new residence to be submitted formally, and it is my submission that Council staff have not fairly considered the demolition of the existing building with its proposed replacement. Under the planning policy, the retention of the building is stated as desirable. It is not mandatory, not essential. Demolition is not prohibited or unlawful. The owner retains a right to prefer demolition of the derelict building and redevelop it in a sympathetic style. I encourage you to consider the benefits of the precinct of a sympathetic redevelopment. In conclusion, I would just like to say this: the application submitted is comprehensive, detailed, and embraces the continuation of the heritage amenity of the area, and I respectfully seek you support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Someone prepared to move the executive recommendation? Councillor Kelly. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cook. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As Chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee, we've given this great consideration at our meetings. It seems that our area of East Bunbury is a bit under siege, but we get good advice from our heritage people and we get good advice from our heritage advisor, and that's the advice that we consider as we make our decisions. This particular building is a contributor to the significance of this heritage area. It may well not be a heritage listed building itself, but it is in an area of the rare sawtooth setback pattern and is one part of the character of that particular area. As the professional staff have quite rightly pointed out to us, that any building that's been neglected is not a valid reason to justify demolition under state planning policy. And the Heritage Advisory Committee does stick with the process that is given to us. This particular heritage area went through a long and sometimes difficult gestation as it was put to council. It was made a heritage area for a specific reason, and I think that we are all, as a council, mayor and councillors, obliged to look after that policy. It's not something that was given lightly. In saying that, I'm asking councillors to support the recommendation. It's noted that the City of Bunbury is quite willing to consider any feasible option for retention and restoration of the dwelling. That can be done. It retains the sawtooth setback pattern. It retains the integrity of that particular part of the heritage precinct, and that policy that we live by should be respected. And hopefully we don't get too many more coming to us where we overturn the integrity of that heritage area. So I ask councillors to support the executive recommendation as it's been moved and seconded. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think Councillor Kelly's covered a fair bit of it. I mean, this one really disturbs me because of a lot of hidden agendas and potential opportunities here, and I don't know how far I can push the envelope, but you know, the same owner owns 1 and 3, so 1, 3 and 5. See a bulldozer going through 3 blocks, 12, 15 apartments. Look, Mr Mayor, councillors, we have a heritage precinct area, we have a heritage committee, we have a heritage officer. There's no point in having those if we're going to buckle every time somebody with a derelict building, which I might add is due to lack of investment during the period of time. And, you know, to speak of vandalism, what's wrong with insurance and getting it repaired? So death by neglect is quite alive and well. So, councillors, I'd urge you to support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour, please indicate. As against? That's carried. So that recommendation has now been, is the decision of council. We move on to 12.1. Councillor Kelly, do you move that?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Smith. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this particular motion on notice is asking you to support an interim policy position that we do not support, encourage or promote smoking in public places within the city, and directs the CEO to draft an appropriate statutory instrument to regulate smoking in public places. Tobacco smoking is a leading cause of preventable death and disease in Australia and claims the lives of over 15,000 Australians every year. And there's no one in this chamber who does not acknowledge the scourge of smoking. And the City of Bunbury, the Bunbury City Council, has the capacity to do its share in the nationwide anti-smoking campaign. And this motion is drafted specifically to enable Council to address a serious policy gap, pointed out to us by our hard-working staff, the absence of any formal council policy or position regarding tobacco smoking. That's what we were told. So I'm filling a policy gap here, and by way of policy principle, when anything holds the threat of serious or irreversible damage to human health, a lack of policy should not be allowed to prevent containment or remediation when the balance of potential costs and benefits are justified. It's very important that we don't leave policy vacuums, and to talk about the balance of potential costs and benefits, smoking, as I've said, leads to cancer, heart disease, stroke, lung, chest illnesses, stomach ulcers and ultimately death. For many, it kills. In fact, too, the ABS reported that in 2004-05, the last major study, estimated the cost of smoking to Australia in social, including health and economic costs, at $31.5 billion. So by way of honouring the policy principle, the motion resolves to have Council apply an interim policy position that does not support, encourage or promote smoking in public places. And in effect, it provides an interim position upon which Council can consider development applications that come to its hard-working staff that involve an element of tobacco smoking. I do note the officer's comments, particularly that the city is in the process of reviewing its local laws, including the Local Government and Public Property Local Law, where the regulation of smoking in public places could potentially be included as part of that review. I hope it is. It better be. I'm grateful for the process and glad that my motion fits with it, in that Council will apply an interim policy position to underpin a strong stance opposed to the commercialisation of smoking in public places. I also note that the officer qualification that until such time as this is tested by the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation, it is unclear as to whether a clause on smoking would be disallowed. It's very important, but I say let's show some leadership in the space. If the Joint Standing Committee does eventually disallow a clause on smoking in our local law, at least we, the Bunbury City Council, have had a fair crack at it. I had a go at doing something positive in the campaign against tobacco in Bunbury. Otherwise, the officers noted other aspects to consider, which are right at the end of my motion on notice there. The practicalities of enforcement, a never-ending challenge, as Councillor McCleary at once pointed out about the cigarette butts that are accumulating left, right and centre. We've always got the challenge of enforcement. And resourcing in relation to enforcement, ditto, we've got the same issue. Consideration as to which public places that the relevant clause would apply. Public places are defined under several acts, including the Health Act and the Public Health Act, and this will be part of the process that I'm suggesting that we start here, which is to develop a policy. I can hear the policy committee writhing in their seats with joy. Noting that such a clause would not be applied to private property, that is businesses, make it very clear we're not talking about private property rights here. We are talking about public places as defined. So in summarising that, what we're looking for, councillors, given the acknowledgement everywhere that smoking does kill, is some sort of interim policy position that allows us to consider commercialisation of smoking, as occurred a couple of weeks ago, and it directs the CEO to draft an appropriate statutory instrument to get there. It may well be that it'll be advertised, it'll be picked over, it will be shot at, it'll be shot up. But ultimately, we need a policy to fill the policy vacuum that we realised that we had a couple of weeks ago. So I'm asking councillors to support the motion on notice and allow our staff to get on with the business of developing the appropriate instruments. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. I support Councillor Kelly in this because I also have concerns on the health issues. I've never been a smoker, and I've always encouraged my friends never to smoke if they could. I've also banned smoking in my house and have done so for the last 40 years. Some of you may remember my mother-in-law as the dolphin lady, the first person probably in the country who started feeding the dolphins down on the Leschnol estuary. She died of lung cancer, but she was never a smoker, but the people around her smoked, and so she caught it through the, what you call it, the side stream or slipstream smoke. So I guess, and we saw that, and it wasn't very pleasant. So I concur with Councillor Kelly, and I think it's an eminently sensible to have a policy on smoking in the City of Bunbury. Thank you.
Speaker against. Councillor Stick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Whilst I can sympathise with these comments about what smoking does to public health, it's relative to the fact that the jurisdiction to place a governance or a law banning cigarette smoking is in fact the responsibility of state government, sir. And I'd also say that the federal government itself has attempted to eradicate cigarette smoking through the exorbitant costs of taxes that they place on those items. Personally, I have been a long-term advocate of a sugar tax. Obesity and other diseases, including heart diseases, is amongst one of the biggest rising killers of all Australians. So, because I have a specific view, do I impose that view on the members of our community when it is a law-abiding citizen going about their law-abiding business, provided they're not, doing it in doorways, which is part of the Public Health Act? They can't do it in the doorways or any of the council properties or in public places. They are subject to their own obligation to follow those rules, and I would strongly urge council that this is not our jurisdiction. We do not have the capacity to police this, and just because we put up a local law, we've already tonight put aside, hundreds, tens of thousands of dollars for people who are flouting our rubbish laws and people who are flouting our parking laws. Do we really want to go down this path of making exorbitant cost to council staff and to an already dwindling budget? I'd say, look, leave this to state government. It's their jurisdiction, sir, and I'd urge councillors, whilst I agree with, the sentiment, really it's not a place for local government.
Further Speaker 4, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I acknowledge Councillor Stick's comments. I thoroughly agree with them. It's definitely a state government issue, and they really need to get on and do something about it fairly quickly. Stop smoking in public places in Western Australia. However, having said that, they're not doing anything. They're sitting on their hands, And I think it's time that we made a statement, and basically that's what it is. It's a statement that we don't support smoking in the Bunbury region, but to put a ban in isolation with other places is really difficult. And I hope the state government are listening to this and will do something about it. But in the interim period, I'd urge that you do support this motion. Thank you.
Further speaker against? Councillor McGuell.
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, and I wanted to, because I didn't enter the debate last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, and to put my points across about this whole issue. Again, I'm not a smoker. I have been, but I'm not a smoker. I have friends that are. I have family that are. I have also lost people with lung cancer. It's a horrible thing. I don't condone smoking at all. However, as Councillor Steck has mentioned, I don't believe it's our place to be telling people what they can and can't do when there's state and federal laws in place. She mentioned sugar tax. 100% agree. Look at fast food. Are we going to start regulating alcohol? That's a killer. Are we going to regulate stuff? Our council has a duty to do what our ratepayers need to do. So I think getting involved in something like this is outside our jurisdiction. I'm all for it, and potentially lobbying the state government is the way to go, Councillor Kelly, and I would be supportive of you in that regard. However, I don't think this council can go and start making laws. I did look at. The other thing is this has come up pretty suddenly, obviously. Well, this motion, I did follow up on some of the stuff, including the Margaret River ban. They tried to ban smoking in their main street. They couldn't pass a local law to support it, so they basically had a ban in their street. However, there's no fines or enforcement, so it's simply a couple of signs up saying you can't smoke here. However, if you read the reports and business owners can say it hasn't had any effect on smoking in the city or in the area. So it's obviously, and that's the problem, is that we're going to spend a whole lot of time and energy of staff time, which is probably doing a lot more important things, on drafting up something here which potentially isn't going to go anywhere. I love the enthusiasm, Councillor Kelly, but unfortunately I can't support you in this regard. Speaking with the CEO, there is a public health plan in the works I hear, and I look forward to seeing that go forward, but from here I can't support this recommendation.
Further speaker 4, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're not asking to be enforcers. We're not asking that it be a law. We're asking that we set up a policy that supports our staff when people or businesses come to us wanting to put a commercial smoking area in. They'll have a policy there for which to guide them through that. That's all we're asking for. I would like to see, and I'm an extremist, okay, I would like to see smoke-free in the CBD, quite frankly, and maybe in 20 years' time that'll happen. But right now, I would like to go with what the actual motion on notice is, that Council resolves to apply as an interim policy position for the Bunbury City Council and does not support, encourage or promote smoking. We're not banning smoking, we're encouraging people to stop. I am an ex-theatre nurse, and the people that used to come in there with lobectomies and other items that we had to deal with through their smoking, be it they've just come in, all the complications that went on with smoking. I know people say, yes, I have people who are sick, who I've known my family died of it and all the rest of it, but you get them on the theatre table and you have a really good look at what their body is like when they have been smoking and what they have to deal with. Even arthritis is caused through smoking. So I want to help support and encourage people not to smoke. And the way that I feel our City Council could do the same for the better health of our community is to put a policy through so we've got guidelines sitting there. Not to enforce people, not to make a law, but to have a policy. So please, I encourage you to support this.
Further speaker against? Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors, firstly, I just got to re-emphasise both Councillor Steck and the Deputy Mayor were talking about banning smoking. We are not banning smoking, and indeed we don't have the jurisdiction to do that. I need to repeat it again, we are not banning smoking. We're giving our planning people a policy structure so that when somebody comes along with a DA, development application, to get a development approval that involves an element of tobacco smoking, as did the shisha process, they have something to hang their hat on. We don't want to let our planning people hang out to dry. So it's very important that we realise that this is a council policy that, in the absence of any formal policy, fits a bill. It's not saying, well, we're going to ban smoking or we're going to do something radical about people who smoke. It's not about that at all. It's about having some position in this council, an interim policy position that doesn't support, encourage or promote smoking in public places. I haven't used the word ban anywhere and I don't intend to. I know about the Tobacco Act. So, councillors, I think this is a good step forward. In the interim period that we wait for our local health plan, we've got a responsibility to send a message to the broader community. I note that in Armidale, Margaret River and the City of Perth, they've all done something about bringing in planning regulations regarding tobacco smoking. We need not be afraid of it. It is an interim policy position and it will enable the CEO and the planning staff to draft some sort of statutory instrument to come back to us, and then we have the ability to say, yes, we like it, we don't like it, we need to modify it or elsewise. But this stands together with all of the health people in the southwest and in Western Australia, indeed Australia. I think it's been noted quite widely that the City of Bunbury has a position on public health and allowing the commercialisation, or not in this case, of tobacco smoking within its jurisdiction. So I ask councillors to support the motion on notice and let's get on with the job. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All in favour, please.
Sir, can I just ask a quick question?
No, the debate's finished now, Councillor Steck. All those in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's lost. I think we are done. Councillors, thank you very much. Officers, thank you. Members of the public, thank you for your attendance. I declare this meeting closed at 6:26 p.m.